Hi guys, so last summer I did a what's on my Kindle video, and I thought since it's been almost a year I would do an updated what's on my Kindle video. Obviously you see a lot of the physical books I own through hauls and bookshelf tours, but you don't necessarily find out what ebooks I have at my disposal from my regular videos until I've actually read them. So I thought it might be interesting for those of you who just like to know what's kind of on my TBR and what I have floating around to see what I have on my e-reader. This is a very old Kindle. I think it's like the second generation Kindle. This was my granny's years ago and now it's mine. It is amazing though because, like I said, it's years old and it just does everything I could possibly want it to do. I tend to delete books off of my Kindle once I've read them so they don't take up any space. So the books I'm going to be telling you about that are on my Kindle are generally books I haven't read yet. And for the sake of brevity, I'll try not to include the books left over from my last What's on my Kindle video that are still on here. You can go and watch that video if you're interested. But I get a lot of my ebooks either as free classics that I download, because a lot of classics are in the public domain so are free. I also get a lot of ebooks off of NetGalley, which is a reviewer's website where you can request ebooks to review. And I do occasionally buy an ebook if I'm interested, if it's cheaper or I just want it immediately. But I think that's enough introduction and let's have a look at the book. The first one is one I'm actually reading, and that's Broken River by J. Robert Lennon. This is actually a book I do have a physical copy of. It's a haunted house-esque horror mystery novel that I was sent by the publishers, but I actually also requested the ebook version on NetGalley before knowing that they'd sent it to me, and because the physical book is a hardback so it's a lot to lug around, I've been reading the e-version because obviously this is really light and easy, and I've been zooming through this one. It's very absorbing, just like I said, haunted house-esque mystery horror book set in the modern day. I then have a copy of a book that I also have a physical copy of, and that's The Corn King and the Spring Queen by Naomi Mitchison. You might have seen that I was reading the physical copy of this, but it was a really heavy book with very small print that I was just finding quite difficult to read on my eyes when I was carrying around, so I caved and bought the Kindle copy because I was enjoying it so much, but I wanted an easier way to read it, and I'm finding I'm speeding through it a lot quicker now that I'm reading the e-version. It's a book set in 2nd century BC and it's a bit of a mixture of historical fiction and fantasy. I then have a book which I have actually read, and that's Kissing the Witch by Emma Donoghue. I read this on my Kindle and re-downloaded it recently from my archive because I was thinking I might reread it. It's a collection of fairy tale retellings where women either save themselves or save one another, and there's a lot of LGBT themes in it by Emma Donoghue. I loved this collection when I read it, so I thought I'm fancying reading that one again. I then have At the Mouth of the River of the Bees by Keege Johnson, and this is a collection of short stories I saw Mercedes from Mercy's Bookish Musings channel a while ago. She loved it and I actually bought it on my Kindle way back then, read 50% of it and then just never read the rest of the stories on it. I liked the stories, but I obviously wasn't in love with the collection or I wouldn't have kind of forgotten about it in the way I did, but I did think I would put it back on my Kindle and see if I was more in the mood for her style of writing, so I might see if I finish that one. I then have The Other Half of Happiness by Yisha Malik. This is a sequel to Sophia Khan Is Not Obliged, which is a contemporary romance book set in London which follows a Muslim girl writing a book about Muslim dating, and this is obviously the sequel so I won't say anything about it or it would give you major spoilers for the first one, but I really enjoyed the first one. I then have a copy of Gather the Daughters by Jenny Melamed, which I've mentioned a few times recently as an anticipated release of mine, and I got a review copy of NetGalley. It's a feminist dystopian book which just sounds really, really good, and I think it's out now, so definitely one to have a look into. I then have the Oedipus trilogy by Sophocles, which are 3 Greek plays which are often grouped together either as the Theban plays or the Oedipus trilogy by the ancient Greek tragedy in Sophocles, and those are Antigone, Oedipus Rex and Oedipus at Colonos. And I have never actually read Antigone, which is why I downloaded the collection, although I've read the other ones so I could finally read Antigone. I then have No Is Not Enough by Naomi Klein, which is a non-fiction book, the subtitle of which is Resisting Trump's Shock Politics and Winning the World We Need. So I think that pretty much sums that one up. I got that off NetGalley as well. I then have another NetGalley find, and that's When Dimple Met Rishi, and I've heard a few people review this recently. It's a young adult book about two teenagers whose parents are attempting to set them up in an arranged marriage, which sounds really interesting. And then I'm so excited for this next one. I got it off of NetGalley and it's not actually out until 2018, but it's Circe by Madeline Miller, and Madeline Miller wrote the Song of Achilles. She's very famous for her take on the ancient Greek myth of Achilles and Patroclus and the Trojan War, and this is her new book, which is all about Circe, who is a character from Greek mythology, and obviously it's a Greek myth retelling, and I'm so excited for it. I think Circe is such a fascinating character and I'm so intrigued to read a retelling of her story. I then have The Trojan Women by Euripides, which is an ancient Greek tragic play that I have read but want to reread, so I downloaded that onto my Kindle. And a lot of these ancient Greek plays, like I said, you can get for free. They're not always the most up-to-date translation, but they're worth giving a shot since they are, like I said, free. I then have The Upstairs Room by Kate Murray Brown, which is in fact another haunted house, modern horror mystery-esque novel. I must really be in the mood for those. I then have The Accusation by Bandy, which are a collection of short stories by a North Korean author, and there's a lot of buzz around this collection because I don't think we have any other literature that's come from a North Korean writer who's still in North Korea, and that is why they have the pseudonym Bandy with their collection. And I've actually read about half of these, which are really interesting, and I do plan on going back and reading the others. I then have The Great God Pan by Arthur Machen, which I bought after seeing a paper being delivered about this book, as it is inspired by ancient myths and classical themes, and this is actually a horror novel from the late 1800s. I then have The Lottery Plus One by Emma Donoghue, which is Emma Donoghue's first children's book, so I had to give that one a read. I then have They Can't Kill Us All by Wesley Lowry, which is a non-fiction book all about racial prejudice in America, police brutality protests, and activism around these issues. House of Names by Colm Tobin, which I actually, again, own a physical copy of. I know, right? I bought a physical copy of this one having not realised that I'd been approved for the review copy on NetGalley, so I do have an e-copy as well, but it's fine. I then have New Boy by Tracy Chevalier, which is from the Hogarth Shakespeare series and is a retelling of Othello. I then have Nasty Women, which is a collection of essays, feminist essays. Medea by Euripides. As you can tell, I have a lot of Greek plays on here. Again, Medea I have read, I just fancied rereading it, so put it on my Kindle for easy access. In Calabria by Peter S. Beagle. I haven't actually read any Peter S. Beagle yet, but he is famously the author of The Last Unicorn, and this is another one of his fantasy novels, which I saw on NetGalley and had to request since I've heard such good things about him. I then have Chasing Odysseus by Sulari Gentle, which is the first in a young adult series retelling Greek myths I thought I would give a try, so I actually did buy that one. I have Dreams of Distant Shores by Patricia A. McKillip, which may actually have been in my previous video. It's a collection of fantasy short stories by Patricia A. McKillip. I've read the first few in it. As you can tell, I seem to dip in and out of short story collections. I then have Final Girls by Riley Sager, which is a thriller novel that everyone seems to be talking about at the moment. It's about girls who all survived kind of mass killings or serial killers. They were the final girl, and a new serial killer that's going and killing girls who didn't die the first time around, if that makes sense. I then have How to Survive a Plague by David France. I got a PDF of this one at work. I do also have the physical copy, but it's a huge hardback that I have, so I found it easier to read it on my Kindle, and I've not finished it, but I've sort of dipped in and out of it and also seen the documentary. It's a non-fiction book about the AIDS epidemic in 1980s, and specifically about the activism around that in America. I then have What Is Not Yours Is Not Yours by Helen Oyemi, which is a collection of short stories. I love the novels by Helen Oyemi that I've read though, and her writing is beautiful. I think it just, to me, strikes me as the perfect writing style for short stories, so I am really excited to read her short stories. I then have The Ragged Trousered Philanthropist by Robert Tressel, which is a classic from the early 1900s, which is overtly political from what I've heard. I believe it kind of deals with the class struggle, and it's a described as a working class classic, and you know, I've just heard people I know rave about it, so I bought that one so that I could finally read it. And from there, I think actually everything else on my Kindle was on it when I did my last What's on my Kindle video, so I won't sit here and list all of those as well. You can obviously check out that other video if you're interested, but I hope you enjoyed this little insight into what's on my Kindle. Always handy to have lots of books in your handbag if you can't fit more than one physical book, so I do find my Kindle very, very handy, and I also use the Kindle app on my phone so that I can just sort of move the books between the two and read wherever I am. This video is not sponsored by Kindle. I'm sure the same goes for any e-reader or e-reader apps. But I hope you've enjoyed this video, and until next time guys, happy reading. I'll see you all again soon. Bye!